Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'm so pleased to have South Heroes native son Lars Hedborg here. He's also a Folsom alum, so our education system has done a great job. If you don't have solar eclipse glasses, or your grandkids don't have them, or children or cousins or whatever, I have some, Lars brought some, I don't want to have any left over. So please pick them up. And one last quick announcement from me, we're only going to be open from 10 to 2 so that it doesn't get stuck in the library. So get all your books here today or tomorrow or Monday morning. And without more for me, let's give a big round of applause for Lars.
Well, thank you all very much for coming out. I really hope that we might have a good turnout, and I'm thrilled. I really appreciate it. Let me introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. There we go. Okay, my name is Lars Hedborg. I'm the leading novelist of the American Revolution. I have 16 books in print, another one coming this year, and many more beyond that. I've also had the opportunity to appear on national television a couple of times as an expert on the American Revolution. It drives my wife a little bit nuts because she has a history degree, so she's a historian, but I just play one on TV. I've also written extensively for the Journal of the American Revolution, which is an online journal that is sort of a scholarly journal of events and incidents of the American Revolution. And I'm also the author of the Bullseye Star Charts books as an amateur astronomer and advanced amateur astronomer. You can start to see where these interests start to are intersecting here. And I've been the board member of the premier dark sky astronomy event in the country, the Oregon Star Party, for over 2 decades. So I've got some pretty deep knowledge in this area. It would not be a talk about a solar eclipse if we didn't spend some time talking about eclipse safety. You would definitely want to use these special solar glasses. Please do not observe the partial eclipse with just sunglasses, or even using a smoked glass, as some of us did when we were younger. Those methods do let through some harmful rays. And the problem is that because there is less light, the pupil expands, which lets more in, but the light is still brilliant enough to do damage. Okay, and absolutely do not point any kind of telescope or anything at the partial phases unless it has a proper filter. And there have been a number of filters that have been distributed lately that are not of the quality that they need to be. So please check with the American Astronomical Society's list to make sure that whatever filters you're using are on that list and are approved and safe. Yes?
Lars, if you're wearing your eclipse glasses and you have your iPhone, can you put an eclipse glass in front of the thing?
Yes, yes,
okay.
that will be perfectly safe. And then the other thing to bear in mind is that the eclipse glasses are only for the partial phases. When we hit totality, please get those off your face and experience it. Okay? And I've been through one totality. It is, after the totality was over, I turned to my neighbor and I said, I'm really sorry for all the noise that I made because I was roaring. Literally, it is primal. Okay? And he said, I couldn't hear you over myself. So, but yes, during totality, please look at it. Look at it. And I'll talk a little bit more about what you can look for. Sorry?
We can use our camera phones to.
Yes, absolutely. But I would encourage you not to spend too much time, trying to fiddle with your equipment and take one picture, sure, but spend most of your time experiencing it. Okay, there will be lots of people who are taking professional photos that you can use to remember it by, but you've got to form those memories. And if your memory is looking at a piece of equipment, you're gonna miss out. I speak from experience here because I had the opportunity to watch a space shuttle launch many years ago, and I spent the entire thing fiddling around with my equipment instead of experiencing the launch, and I've regretted that to this day. Okay, And yes, the same thing applies to your cameras and phones. Before the eclipse is total and after it finishes totality, that's where a lot of people get into trouble. Is they'll have their telescope pointed at it or whatever, they'll have their camera pointed at it, and then the moon slides out from in front of the sun, and all of a sudden, you're getting the full. So keep an eye on the time. That 3.5 minutes or whatever it is we're going to get here is going to pass faster than you can believe. Okay. All right. So what causes a total eclipse of the sun? This is one of those things that I don't want to take for granted that everybody understands, because it is kind of hard to picture. So as you know, the moon goes around the Earth, okay, and it is by a coincidence or by divine providence, it is exactly the size to blot out the sun in the sky. Okay, the moon's orbit wobbles, or I shouldn't say wobbles. It's at an angle to our orbit around the sun. So we orbit around the sun like this. The moon's orbit around us is at a slight angle. So what that means is that most of the time, when the moon passes between us and the sun, it's too high or too low to blot out the sun. On that rare occasion, when it's just lined up exactly right, then it also has to be at just the right distance. If it's too close to us in its orbit, because the orbit is not even, it's a little bit wobbly, a little lopsided. It's too close to us, we get a partial, we get an annular eclipse, where the sun is still visible all the way around the moon. And I saw one of those here. I don't remember what year it was, back in the 90s. It was spectacular, okay? But it's not a total solar eclipse. It's a different experience. And this next slide talks a little bit more about that, the idea of the planes of the eclipse. Our eclipse on Monday is going to start way out in the South Pacific and extend all the way across North America and out into the Atlantic. As you can see, so the total eclipse, the total portion of it is this dark blue. The rest of it is where it is partial. So it's going to be observable in one form or another across all of North America. Okay, except for where there's clouds. And I know a lot of people who have gone to Texas to go observe it, and it looks like they're going to get clouded out. Our forecast here is kind of mixed, but it is one of the most hopeful forecasts I've seen anywhere along the track. In a rich irony for my friends who went to Texas.
You said all of North America is what would Alaska actually be seeing, given that it was outside what you showed us the upper?
So what they're going to see down in Anchorage, I guess not even in Anchorage, they're going to see just normal day, because the moon's shadow is passing beyond where they're going to be able to be affected by it. Down in the Panhandle, they'll see a little tiny partial eclipse, and you'll have to look very carefully to see it. One of the things I meant to mention about how to observe the eclipse, if you don't have solar glasses, you can also do pinhole projection. And you can do that as simply as by taking a colander out of your kitchen and just holding it up, and then looking at the image of the sun that gets projected. And in the early parts of the eclipse, you'll see the sun with a bite out of it, and that bite will grow and grow and grow until we reach totality. Okay.
Excuse me, real quick.
Yes.
Can you explain why the shadows on the ground project those with like a million of them when you walk through like trees?
Oh, that's a great question. So essentially, if I understand your question correctly, what you're talking about is the sort of dappling that we get as we walk along. So basically, what's happening is the individual shadows of the tree branches and leaves are, they start out very sharp at the point where the shadow is formed, and then because of atmospheric scattering, they become a little bit less well defined as they get further away. And those shadows will start to overlap each other, and then the branches move and the leaves flutter and so forth, and so you get all of that movement along the ground. During the solar eclipse, there will also be some very specific shadow phenomena. It's called, I think, shadow banding. And basically what you'll see, I didn't see it when I observed the eclipse in 2017, but I was also not in a shaded place. I was out in the middle of the Oregon high desert. But in a place where you do have some shadows around, what I've heard is that you'll see shadows kind of racing along the ground. So watch out for that. It's kind of a neat effect. It's one that, again, I haven't observed it personally, so I can't really discuss what it might look like. So here are some of the things to look like. If we have clear skies, okay, which we're all hoping for. The main thing that you're gonna see that's going to just absolutely blow your mind. There's a hole in the sky, okay, surrounded by this white outer layer. That's the outer atmosphere of the sun. Okay, and then there will be these little pink or red prominences around the sun, and those are jets of plasma and gas that are always there, but we can never see them, just like the outer atmosphere of the sun is always there. We can never see the corona, as it's called, because the sun itself is too bright. And so you look up, dark sky, and there's this hole. There's no other way to describe it, that has this bright stuff around it. The other thing to watch out for, again, if we have good, clear skies, there will be several bright planets that are visible. There will also be a comet. There's a bright comet pretty near to the sun. Okay, obviously, it's out there right now. We can't see it. We have a total solar eclipse going right now. But I saw a great video. So you're chasing the shadow. Well, we can give you shadows. No, I want a very particular kind of shadow. I don't want this cloud shadow. No, I want, So the comet is actually out there in the sky right now, and I know a couple of people who have observed it during the daytime. I've gotten a couple of photos of it at night, just after sundown. It's very bright, very spectacular right now. It's a neat comet. And if the sky gets dark enough, you can look at it. It'll be off to the, it's going to be off to the left. So, okay. All right. The other things to watch out for. Again, the shadow bands. Pay attention to the birds. Pay attention to their songs and what they're doing. You'll hear them. Birds wake up in the morning and choose violin. they wake up and they celebrate the fact that they made it through another night. Right? So you get all this morning bird song that's very, very loud and very specific. And you'll hear that especially as the totality ends. You'll feel the temperature change. The temperature will come down by 10 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. And because of that, you'll even feel a breeze. Because with that temperature decrease, there's actually a difference in air pressure. And I did experience that in 2017. Okay, if it's cloudy, all is not lost. Okay? There are actually some things that you can only observe in a total solar eclipse if it's cloudy. You can watch the moon's shadow racing towards you, and it moves very quickly. I've seen some videos of this where you see this blackout just racing right over. Okay, and we don't get to see that if it's not cloudy. Okay, you'll also, because we live on the lake, if you can get to a place where you're going to be looking out over the lake, you can see the shadow racing along the ground too, because it's a nice even layer. I've heard people say that when they observed it at ocean sides or on flat fields, the lakes can work just great for that too. So watch for that if we happen to be clouded out. Animal behavior and temperature drop in degrees, those will still be present also. Okay. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about this eclipse in 1780. Now, why am I excited about the eclipse in 1780? Several reasons. First of all, it happened right in the middle of the American Revolution. The American Revolution started, as we all know, in 1775 with Lexington and Concord through to the signing of the Treaty of Paris was in 1781. Okay, so 1780, when the eclipse took place, that's right in the middle of the war. Right, as you can see, this eclipse passed primarily over northern Canada, which was occupied. It was inhabited by various Native American peoples. But the only place that was really inhabited by European settlers was right along the coast of Maine, which is great for going and observing, right? But there was a small problem. Maine had just been taken by the British 1 year before in our greatest naval defeat until Pearl Harbor. Penobscot, Maine had fallen to the British. The loss of something like 500 American lives. Okay. So very, very, it was an awkward place for us to try to ask to go and observe it. But it was very important. The timing, of course, was well known, because you can calculate this stuff even back in the 18th century. The British, because they held this territory, might have been a natural candidate to do these observations, but they were much more focused on their military objectives at that time. So a professor at Harvard went to John Hancock and said, could you please secure permission for us to send an expedition up to go observe this? So we have this wonderful letter from John Hancock, basically where he says, if you are a friend to science, you will permit our expedition to pass. We promise we're not up to anything. We just want to advance human knowledge. And part of why this was so important to Harvard and why Hancock agreed to send this letter to the British commander was that this was America stepping onto the stage and saying, we are part of the community, science, knowledge, understanding, and we want to take our place and be a part of that. So, the British commander accepted this request, but he accepted it with some limitations. So, he said, so that the fort that they had taken was up here, and he said, you can only set up out on this island in Penobscot Bay, because there we figure you can't get into any trouble. And you can only be here for a few days before and after, which Professor Williams from Harvard really wanted to have some additional time so that he could have better calibration of his clocks, better, because he could tell what time noon was, because that's when the sun reaches its highest extent. So he could make sure that he had the clock just absolutely right. And if he had longer to do that, he could do a better job with that. But the British said, no, you can only be here, and you can only be here for a little while. Okay? And I'll go ahead and spoil it a little bit. This line here, this is where it was total. Notice where he is. How many miles is that? About 35 miles. So it wasn't too far off. The difference between a total eclipse and a very deep partial eclipse is like the difference between day and night, literally. It's a deep sunset versus deep night. However, he still managed to get some scientific results, including some really important scientific results. Because he was able to time the phenomena of the eclipse, he was able to say, okay, I know where I am. He was able to fix the longitude, which was the primary goal of the eclipse. He was, don't get me wrong, he was still very frustrated. His journals make it clear that he was really unhappy. But one thing that he observed that was really fascinating, you notice along here, he's drawing the disk of the moon, and you notice these little breaks here. And he referred to these in passing, oh yeah, I saw these drops of light along the edge of the moon. And then he went on to the rest of his disappointment and everything else. About 30, 40 years later, a British astronomer, of course he had to be British, noted that same phenomenon and named it Bailey's beads. Something else to watch for on Monday. What that is it's the very last light of the sun slipping through the valleys along the edge of the moon's limb.
Oh,
Okay? And what happens is you'll see the light kind of move as it slips from one valley to the next. Okay? Really important discovery, and he didn't notice that it was an important discovery. If he had noticed that, we might call them Williams drops today instead of Bailey's beads. And of course, the British got credit for it instead of our guy. So, I wrote a book about this dark day. 1780 in Maine was a hard year. That May, there was another dark day that really confounded people and really scared them. the sky grew completely dark. There was a smell of sulfur in the air, or smoke. And those of us who have been in the Pacific Northwest know exactly where this is going. There had been massive wildfires inland in Canada, and the smoke passed over all of New England and caused this dark day. And it really scared people because they didn't understand it. And then we had this eclipse the same year. And there were a lot of people who said, that's a sign, you know, our revolution is doomed. Right? But what I wanted to do with this book was I wanted to explore what it was like to be one of the sons of the farmer where they set up that expedition. Okay? And see it through his eyes. He's a kid, maybe kind of trying to shirk his chores. And all of a sudden this, you know, and the prior year, the British had come and had you know, kicked the American forces out and killed a great number of people in the process. So, you know, you're living literally in the shadow of this British fort, and trying to, you know, maintain your daily life while all of this is going on literally within sight of your house. You can see all of this happen. And then this ship comes in that's flying an American flag, and the British aren't firing at it. What the heck is going on? And they land, and they come up and they talk to your dad. And they say, you know, we're here to do this scientific expedition. Do you have a suitable place for us? And so far I'm on solid historical ground. This is what actually happened. Okay. The family cleared out the barn for this expedition to set up in. And they, right there on that farm, they did all of these observations. Okay. So because I'm an historical fiction author, I added a little bit to it from there. I added a very, very spirited young woman who we meet as she is kicking in the jaw of a British soldier who had attempted to assault her in an alley. I really like her. And of course she fascinates my main character, the farmer's son, George. And they wind up with some thrilling heroics that again are not supported in the historic record, but which I thought were useful to illustrate kind of some of the importance of spying and how it unfolded in different places. Again, not using real people, but using characters who behaved as much as I could make them like the real people who lived at that time. Okay. This is one of my favorite books because I get to kind of play with all of my astronomical knowledge and put it through the lens of all of my historical knowledge and bring the two together. When I was looking for a story to write in Maine, actually this got started because I was like, you know, I want to write about astronomy in the 18th century. Was there anything that happened that was astronomical? And I found this. I was like, aha, Eureka, perfect. And then I learned about the dark day that they had earlier that year, and it's such a great, compelling story. So I had a lot of fun with that. Any questions? Stunned silence. No, go ahead.
Obviously, an eclipse would have disturbed a lot of Native Americans as well as settlers who were not scientifically. Any documentation as to what kind of impact that had and what they did with that?
That's a great question. I saw an interview just recently with a member of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois nation, modern, who was describing how their culture saw eclipses. And basically the take that they had on it was this was the sun and the moon coming together, and they deserved privacy. So they would actually not watch.
Probably seems a lot of eyes.
Probably, and that may have been kind of the purpose behind the legend. But yeah, the Native Americans definitely were deeply aware of these phenomena. They didn't have the predictions that the Europeans did, but they incorporated them into their mythologies and so forth, just as we do. You know? And as far as the less scientific people, the word about the eclipse was pretty broadly known. It was published in the newspapers and so forth, and people would, and in the almanacs, so, you know, people who consulted such things would have been aware of it, and the word would have filtered out, you know, hey, expect that this strange thing's gonna happen. So, yes?
How far back, like, the earliest recording of an eclipse? Like, I think about the ancients.
Yeah.
Those who couldn't predict it or didn't know what it was, like, what's the earliest we know of a civilization recording?
Yeah, another great question. And for those of you who couldn't hear, he's asking what's the earliest recording that we have of an eclipse. My understanding is that the Chinese, with their very advanced scientific knowledge and obsession with astrology, they had actually started calculating eclipses and were observing them probably 1,000 years before the Europeans really started. I don't have exact dates for you, but that's my best estimation. So, yes?
How did, like, we have these eclipse glasses, everybody's got probably way too many pairs.
Right.
How were they observing the eclipse before we knew about
great
that
question.
sort of thing?
So I actually reached out, and when I was trying to understand, because they didn't record what they used to make the telescope usable, because they were using telescopes to observe this for this particular expedition. I reached out to a friend of mine who runs an astronomy equipment supplier and asked him, you know, what would they have used? And he thought about it and he did some research and he said, well, the best thing that they had available to them was smoked glass. So you take a piece of glass and you hold it over a candle, you get candle black on it, and you do enough layers of that. It is not up to modern standards. It's not, I mean, I know that I certainly looked at the sun through smoked glass when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that anymore. Because it blocks many of the wavelengths, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the ones that can be really damaging get through. So our pupil has expanded because, again, we're exposing it to dark, and we're letting in all of those really bright wavelengths that we can't see but are still damaging up in the ultraviolet, right into the eye.
And that's why
they
you
can
wear
do damage.
glasses now.
That's, no. No, I wear glasses now because I'm a headboard.
Yeah.
Yes,
You mentioned, what was it, Bailey's beads?
yes.
That was in the process of it going into full totality?
Both in and out.
And out, so is that
Yeah.
the diamond ring that when you put
Exactly.
the glasses back on?
Exactly. Yep. When you see the diamond ring, get those glasses back on. That's that first little burst of light, and it will surprise you. I can tell you again from experience that it's like, whoa, okay. Yes, sir.
Did the scientists looking at this use any sort of pinhole camera technology? 'Cause
I didn't
it seems
see
like that-
anything in there, you know, because I looked at basically the manifest of the equipment that they brought up, and there's a lot of good clocks and a couple of telescopes. I didn't see any kind of pinhole projection.
Like a camera obscura, right?
I didn't see anything like that, no. It's not impossible, it might just been, you know, so commonplace that they didn't bother to write it down. Yes?
So the Native Americans had like snow glasses.
Right.
That had a slit, just a slit to see through it. Everything else was like wood.
Yeah.
Maybe that was part of it.
I think you'd still wind up doing damage to yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you remember when you were a kid, if you're anything like me, you burned ants with a magnifying glass, you know? The lens in your eye is just as effective, okay? So if you look at the sun, you're burning a hole in the back of your eye. It may take a little while because it's not focused precisely, or maybe it is, and it's just doing damage in very small pieces. But you can actually, and if you use any kind of, you know, binoculars or a telescope, you've fried an egg. What's inside the eye is a lot like egg white, and it reacts much the same when you put that kind of light on it. The injuries that people get from looking at the sun unsafely are gruesome. Yep.
We're not the only animals with eyes.
Yep.
What about all the rest of them out in the woods or?
That's a great question. I think for the most part, animals are not going to be staring at the sun to take note of the partial phases where it's dangerous, right? Because it's for them, it's just gradually getting dark. It's a strange time, doesn't feel right with their systems, but it's a weird sunset for them. And then the totality is, that may be something that attracts their attention. But I think for the most part, they're not the curious monkeys that we are. They're not going to stare right at it. I would be interested. That's a really provocative question. What about some of the other primates? Do they do damage to themselves because they are so dang curious? And that's something that bears looking into. I don't know the answer.
Quiet in 2017.
I'm sorry?
I said, I remember it getting really quiet during
Yeah.
totality.
Yeah. Where did you get to observe it?
Tennessee,
Murphy, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Nice. I was all the way out the other coast. Yeah, and again, I was out in the high desert, so I didn't have a lot of wildlife around. So a lot of those effects that many people got to experience, I missed out on, but that's okay. Because I was out there with 800 of my closest friends, experiencing the whole thing. It was amazing. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I think you touched on it earlier, but what were the religious, sort of the opposite of the scientific, belief systems at the time? Were there any, like you mentioned that these events were interpreted as, we're not, this revolution is not going in our direction.
Right.
Were there any religious, this is the punishment for your sins? Was there any kind of?
I don't think I've seen anything that was that explicit in terms of making a connection like that. There was some evangelical movement. It was an evangelical Methodist movement that was springing up in Maryland, and that's actually the subject of my next book coming out this year. Little plug. Yeah, stay tuned. But they weren't evangelicals in the sense that we experience them today. They did not. I don't think they really set themselves in opposition to science. They were more interested in spreading the good word and spreading their flavor of it, of course. Yes.
Speaking historically, it seems like Americans have always been very interested in predicting the end times and.
Yeah.
Would you think there was more of it back then? I mean, obviously they applied it to the revolution because it was the main thing the nation was going through at the time. But
I haven't encountered anybody saying that the revolution was a sign of the end times or anything. I have come across a number of commentaries where people were saying that so one of the things that happened in the revolution that I touch on in my book, The Break, there was a group of rowdies who went to go and seize Plymouth Rock, as the symbol of the first occupation of North America, and it broke in half as they tried to take it. And there were people who said, this is a sign of the splitting of the splitting asunder of our peoples, and so there was a certain level of if I can use a kind of a crude term, superstition. But I don't get the sense that there was a whole lot. There were people who were saying God is on our side on both sides. But I don't get the sense that there were a lot of people who were saying that our victory in this battle is the result of direct intervention from the divine. I know that a lot of people have looked at some of the events of the revolution and the unlikelihood of its success and have said, gosh, that really feels like there was somebody putting a thumb on the scale in our favor. As an historian, I look at it and I say, well, I don't necessarily see divine intervention there. I see a lot of very complex factors that don't necessarily spring to mind right away. The most obvious of those is just that England was trying to fight a war across a supply line that extended across some of the most hostile seas in the world. That's kind of an untenable position to start from. Yes, they were a massive power at the time, but they were trying to project that power beyond their grasp, and we slipped through their fingers. Anybody else? These are some great questions, thank you. Gone in some directions I didn't expect to go, that's always fun. Okay, well, you can find me online at larsdhedmore.com. You can also email me at talesfromrevolution.com or at talesfromrevolution@gmail.com. And I do have all of my books up here for sale. If you wanted to grab a copy or all 16, I can do that. And I do have, as Keegan said, I have some solar glasses that I brought. If you don't already have a dozen of them hanging around your house, please feel free to grab one and grab a set and make sure that everybody has them so you can enjoy those partial phases in safety.